Hello and welcome to the Osceola.com's Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer and recruiting writer for the Osceola, joined by head editor Bob Ferrante on this Monday morning. And it is a short turnaround for Florida State as they will be traveling to Virginia on Friday for their first ACC conference game of the season. A lot of important updates coming from Mike Norvell today. Some storylines that we want to discuss coming out of Saturday that we definitely want to touch on. We got a good show for you today. We'll be hitting on all those points as the Florida State Seminoles look to get into the meat and bones of what should be an interesting run of games, Bob. This is kind of the game that we earmarked heading into the season. Hey, Virginia is going to be the game where we figure out what type of cojones this Florida State football team has. Of course, at the time, we were 100% under the impression that Florida State was likely going to lose that Alabama game. And it's crazy how much that one game has completely flipped the perception of what this team can be. And the past, well, technically it's 3 weeks, but the last 2 games have only solidified more of that as you beat the teams that you needed to beat. You did it in the fashion that you needed to do it. You got your starters, for the most part, out of harm's way early in those ball games. How are you feeling if you're Florida State right now, Bob, heading into Virginia with a Friday night game, knowing that, as Gus Malzahn said on Sunday, this is where the real season starts?
I think if you're a Florida State fan, you feel really good about the health of this roster. I mean, that's number one. When you're 3 games in, 4 weeks in with the bye week, except for Chase Lofton, who's going to be out for, it sounds like, a couple of games, you feel pretty good about the overall health on that depth chart, first team, second team, and a couple other guys in those or categories. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to know Tommy Castellanos. Is he 100%, as he said, as Mike Norvell said, or not? But Randy Pittman's back on that depth chart. We'll see about some of the other guys too. Kevin Wynn could make his debut. We did see LaWayne McCoy last week. So I think we thought this was a pivotal game, going back to your kind of opening thought. It still feels kind of pivotal because this is the first time we've seen this team on the road. First time at night, under the lights. How does Florida State respond on a shorter week? Given you've probably prepared for Virginia and Miami for a little while here, considering these last 2 opponents, but it does create some intriguing storylines here as we go into this Friday night game.
Yeah, this is a game that, I mean, really, if you're Florida State, you cannot blink. This is not a middling to lower level Virginia team that you're going in feeling like you can comfortably beat. This is a Virginia team that has a very competent quarterback, a defense that knows what it's doing. Granted, we haven't really seen a team that has been able to stop Florida State's run game. I know that you wrote about that this weekend, Bob. Is Virginia going to be able to do it? Obviously, that's something that we're going to have to find out, and we'll probably explore a little bit more later into the week. Do you want to start touching on some of those injuries? You mentioned Tommy Castellanos. Obviously, every Florida State fan's throat sunk into their heart, I guess, for lack of a better term. I know that there's a saying there, but there was a huge moment that Florida State fans experience when you see Tommy Castellanos get rolled up on, hobbling over to the sideline, has to go into the locker room, is able to jog back out in full pads afterwards to the applause and roar of the crowd. He says he's 100% good coming out of that. I would guess it's a low ankle sprain that he's probably dealing with at this point, Bob. How concerned are you about Castellanos? I'm going to guess the answer is not very, but is there any doubt that he's not going to be able to go? against Virginia on Friday in your mind?
And I think he used the term rolled in that post-game press conference. So he said it was scary, though, right? I mean, I think initially you could tell he hobbled to the sideline. He struggled to get to the locker room when they took that break. Again, with a couple of minutes left in the second quarter, it became halftime and all that, right? So it took him some time to get
the
back
lightning
out.
delay that happened in the middle of a 85-degree sunny day in Tallahassee, by the way, but continue.
It was a super regional lightning delay. Yes.
Getting into the spirit of baseball already.
Level of concern over Tommy Castellanos is I'd say mild. I'd say you're going to have mild concern until you see him in warmups, and it kind of looks like the Tommy who can, move around at, let's say, 80%. 80% Tommy Castellanos is still better than 99% of the college football world. Let's be honest. But I think there's going to be some questioning there. But again, it's the surrounding pieces too. Like Nick, if he's got Randy Pittman as a downfield blocker, if you've got the full complement of the running backs, if you've got every other piece aside from, again, Chase Lofton, he is the distributor. He is a speed guy. He's decisive, but he is an incredible distributor, I think, to me, of the football.
Yeah, you talk about that full stable of running backs. Roydell Williams was at practice this morning. I think this is the first time that we have seen him at practice since he got injured after Alabama game. I don't know if he actually practiced today, but I do know that he was present and visible. So, maybe he was with the team doing rehab with Jerry over on the side of the IPF. Maybe he was doing some calisthenics. I don't know. I don't know what you do for whatever injury he has, but there's a couple of guys that obviously you want to get back there. You mentioned Squirrel White earlier, hasn't played since the Alabama game. Excuse me. He did play against East Texas A&M, but a couple of weeks for what appeared to be a wrist injury, had a brace on earlier. That brace is now off. He's been practicing. Florida State really hasn't needed or missed Squirrel, and that doesn't mean that he's not useful, but especially with what Mekhi Danzey did on Saturday and what Deuce Robinson did the game before against East Texas A&M, Florida State's wide receiver core is in a good spot. Obviously, Bob, always good to get somebody like Squirrel back, but how do you see him fitting into this rotation now, given that other players have stepped up? Is it going to be a plug right back into the norm of what it was, or do you think that things are there may be less playing time for Squirrel now?
I think the unfortunate thing for Squirrel's history is he's had a history of injuries, and he's battled and played through a lot of that at Tennessee. So again, this is why you have wide receiver depth, because you're going to have these issues. I mean, we haven't seen a ton of Gavin Blackwell yet either, and he's a guy who had some injury history at North Carolina. I think what we saw, Nick, against like Alabama and East Texas A&M was Mekhi Danzey looked like that gadget guy. Now he looks like a full-on receiver. And I'll grant you, Kent State's not very good, but that downfield catch right about on the logo where he's between two defenders and he reaches back, still a great ball, reaches back just enough to grab that ball and have the good hands and the presence to make that play. That's a big-time NFL-type receiver play from a guy who's running track in the spring and has just transitioned from running back to receiver. Like, that's a guy who's showing you he needs to get reps and he needs to get snaps out there. So big storyline for us in the preseason, all offseason, was, does Florida State have depth at receiver? I'm going to bring this back full circle. I'm going to talk about receiver depth, I think, until I'm tired of talking about it.
Blue in the face.
But you feel, right? You feel really, really good about Mekhi Danzey, and he maybe wasn't at the top of the list of guys that you were saying, okay, that's my contender, that's my candidate to be more reliable. You watch him and you start feeling really good about the room, and then you say, let's see Elijah Moore, let's see LaWayne McCoy. We saw a little bit of LaWayne McCoy, but you start seeing enough of these guys and you feel just honestly pretty good about the capability of distributing the ball around to various options so that you're not so dependent on a Squirrel White. And really, was Deuce Robinson a good blocker against Kent State, but not a true pass catching guy again. So it feels like the ball is going to find somebody in this offense. I think that's a really good thing.
Well, I could tell you, Deuce Robinson, a 61.3 run blocking grade against Kent State. So 60 is about the average. I mean, PFF grades be what they are. I 100% agreed on the wide receiver depth, to the point where you mentioned Gavin Blackwell's name earlier. I mean, that's a guy that you brought in thinking that you were going to need an extra depth piece there, and he's hardly seen the field. Obviously, injury is part of that. He did injure himself on the first day of camp, and he has not been able to find the field there. But a lot of it, I think, is predicated on what Florida State needed to find out what they had. And you don't really know what Mekhi Danzy is going to be until you find the right guy, or the right genius, rather, and Gus Malzahn, who's going to draw something up, play to his strengths. And now all of a sudden, every single time Mekhi Danzy runs around in a verse motion like that, you're thinking it's going to be 6 points, because he is that versatile. I thought it was hugely impressive that he was able to get some of those downfield throws. I mean, that is some serious speed. And frankly, I don't know of any cornerback in the ACC that is going to be able to keep up with that speed. Like, that is serious speed. That is a serious threat. And that is going to be bookmarked and earmarked on Florida State's all 22 for opposing defensive coordinators pretty much all the rest of the season. Like, you are going to have to start game planning for number 19. And that's not something that I think either you or I would have said coming into the season. You know, you would have thought, okay, it's going to be Squirrel, it's going to be Deuce. Obviously, you take away the height of Deuce and make some of these other unproven wide receivers make plays. Now you have to start seriously game planning for 19. What did you make of his performance on Saturday, Bob? The fact that Deuce had his game a couple weeks before, and Mekhi has his game this weekend. It's like anybody can do this on any given Saturday.
I think that's becoming the beauty of what's going to be a complementary offense. And when I say that, if Mekhi stretches the defense because of that speed, because of the ability to haul in the passes, it's going to make the running game really click very nicely. And that's the bread and butter of this offense. Is, and I don't have the percentages in front of me, but Florida State is running it at a far, far higher rate than it is throwing it. And when Florida State throws, the efficiency, the completion percentage, the lack of drops, it's all looking really, really pretty. And with the asterisk, you're going to say yes, of it's against an FCS opponent and one of the worst FBS teams out there. But the beauty of all this is you're getting experience for a lot of these younger receivers, a lot of these younger tailbacks. So again, I feel really good about where this wide receiver group is. I feel pretty good about where this offense is. I know Gus Malzahn's tried to hit the brakes just about every time we hear from him. He says, well, you know, we've only been healthy going into August in these last 4 or 5 weeks. And it's almost like, man, your problems ain't nothing compared to everybody else around the college football world. People want Florida State's problems right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of younger, well, he's not really a younger guy, but interesting playing time. Sam Singleton getting a bunch of the I guess the second guy in reps behind Gavin Sawchuk. Obviously earned it with his performance against East Texas A&M, and good for Singleton. You know, we've often looped him in with like the Keziah Holmes type, maybe not necessarily in terms of skill set, but definitely in terms of where they are in the depth chart. And hey, this is a guy that can be productive either at another Power 4 program or definitely at a G5 school. You know, if playing time is what he's after, he's got the skill, he's got the talent to be able to do that. Very surprising to know that Ousmane Kroma only had 6 reps against Kent State. I would assume that maybe that's load management. Maybe something happened during the week, or maybe this was really just an attempt for the coaching staff to say, hey, Sam, you know, you did really good against East Texas A&M. Let's see what you got behind Sawchuk this week. Do you lean any particular way on that, or do you think is it being made more complicated than it actually is?
Yeah, I think these are great opportunities for the coaches to give the ball to the lesser known guys. I mean, when your name's not on the depth chart in Sam Singleton and you just got 2 touchdown runs on Saturday and it follows up the East Texas A&M where you already had a touchdown, and then you're throwing Zay Parks out there, and Zay deserves that opportunity to have a day because he's going to be typically your scout team type of guy. So I think these are great games for the lesser known players on the roster. This might be a great opportunity for Sam Singleton just to say, hey guys, if there's an injury down the road, I'm good. I'm here. Like Keziah didn't play. Keziah was I think the only person on the 2 deep that was not in uniform working out pregame. And obviously, Squirrel
I
White.
think he got hurt sometime earlier in the week, is my guess.
Right. So, yes, I mean, if Keziah can't go for any length of time, and you start to get into more injury territory, for example, Roydell's out, and then God forbid you lose somebody else for some short-term, long-term amount, it ain't bad to have Sam Singleton there when needed. I mean, it's almost like you're breaking the glass in case of emergency, and it's not bad to have Sam Singleton there as a guy that you need. And worst cases, also for him, this is kind of his audition for a job next year at some school, G5, whatever program that says that plays in our offense.
Yeah. Wrapping up some of the injury stuff here, we mentioned Squirrel White. We mentioned Tommy Castellanos, Kevin Wynn potentially going to be able to get some run this weekend. That one is a little bit less sure. If you're picking a guy that is probably less likely to play, it's probably going to be Juju. You are getting Randy Pittman back. You alluded to it earlier. He's more than likely going to be able to play this weekend after undergoing, I believe he underwent some kind of procedure. He's got wrap on his leg. I believe it was a torn meniscus is what it was, or partially torn meniscus that somehow he played through against Alabama, which sounds extremely painful to me. So you're going to get Bob's favorite player back on the football field on on Friday night against Virginia. That should help tremendously. And it's not to say that Amari Williams and Landon Thomas haven't done a good job in his absence, but that run blocking grades, the run blocking that Pittman was able to do against Alabama, that was special, and that definitely helps the offense. But it really good for Florida State these past couple of games, Bob. You did what you needed to do. I feel like apart from a couple of scares and maybe some guys that are dinged up with minor short-term injuries, obviously Chase Lofton being the only exception, you escaped from really what can be a scary time in terms of when you're playing younger players and you're trying to get your starters out early. They were able to make it through.
Yeah, and again, I think we've hit on this a lot, and maybe you have the desire to leave a football game earlier to switch channels during a football game. What we like in the second half is at times you get to watch that player development. You can see a little bit more of a Landon Thomas, for example, like we're talking about, who had opportunities with Randy Pittman being injured. You get to see more Marquiston Douglas, more Amari Williams, more Landon Thomas. And honestly, some of those guys, Landon and Amari would say they feel better. They feel better confidence in their blocking, but that wasn't their thing last year. So when it comes to watching this offense, and I think it's looked a little bit different each week under Gus Malzahn. I think he's throwing different things out there to maybe force Virginia and Miami to prepare for a lot of things. But when you look at that Alabama game, Randy Pittman was just about everywhere on the screen. If you're watching at home, if you're watching that kind of all 22 view on that
every snap
by cam, Randy Pittman was constantly out there, was constantly hustling. I don't really care what the PFF grade was for Randy Pittman. I saw him engaged, and it was very consistent. It didn't feel like he took a play off. That's another thing. It's a hot day. It was rainy. It was kind of humid, all that. Randy Pittman gave that kind of effort that I think coaches kind of put out there on Saturdays and then on Sundays, and they said that's what we want from our guy. That's what the backups need to put out there too.
I also don't know how PFF is going to grade blowing up a linebacker and setting him on his ass. I don't know how they grade that, but he did that. We're going to take a quick commercial break, about a minute with our sponsors. We'll be back after that to close on some final storylines heading into the rest of this week. We'll be back in 60 seconds.
Roll Tribe. Florida State's 31-17 win over Alabama kicked off an exciting season for Seminole fans to enjoy with the Osceola's free morning newsletter. Since 1982, the Osceola has provided reliable coverage of Seminole sports and now offers a free daily newsletter with the option to upgrade to full access with a paid subscription. For more information about free or premium subscriptions, visit theosceola.com. Get 31% off your first year subscription and receive $25 off any Osceola branded merch. Visit theosceola.com. The Osceola, which has provided Seminole fans reliable Florida State sports coverage for 44 years, has launched the Osceola Shop, a merchandise store exclusively with Osceola's iconic branded polos, t-shirts, caps, and drinkware. Like the Osceola? Rock its iconic brand with our merch at theosceolashop.com. Are you an Osceola subscriber yet? You join today at a 31% discount and get full access to all our reporting, as well as $25 off your first purchase at the Osceola Shop, as well as 15% off all future purchases at the Osceola Shop and purchases of FSU licensed merchandise at alumnihall.com.
Welcome back to the Osceola.com Seminole Sidelines. Nick Carlisle here with Bob Ferrante. And Bob, now it's time to tackle the fun question that I think everybody is tackling after Florida State's 66-10 victory against Kent State. Kevin Sperry, we talked about it heading into the game. Who's going to be first in? And we felt like, hey, whoever is going to be first in, it's probably going to mean a lot. I felt like it may be Brock Glenn. Excuse me. Ooh, almost had to sneeze there. I felt like it was going to be Brock Glenn. I felt like, hey, if this is truly going to be an injury thing, like Mike Norvell alluded to, or I guess the word is maybe a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Brock being injured earlier in preseason camp. Is it going to be Brock again now as you wind up for ACC play? Tommy Castellanos goes down. It's Kevin Sperry that gets in there first, and it's not like a changing of the guard. Whereas, okay, you've had your time to put the backups in. It's no, the number one quarterback is hurt. Our number two guy's coming in. That guy was Kevin Sperry. Are you surprised, first and foremost, that it was Kevin Sperry?
A little bit, yes. And I think Kevin has continued to look really, really good, really comfortable, and I think composed in this offense. I like what Kevin has shown. I think if we push the conversation forward to Virginia, then you have to ask yourself, as you pipe in crowd noise in the IPF and practices this week, what's the communication?
I don't miss that.
What's the communication like, right? How does it look? How does he handle it? The hand signals, the checks, the signs, the whatever, the nonverbal eye communication with the receiver. How does it all look? Because if you have to throw him out there against Virginia, not that that's the most hostile crowd in the ACC, it's not. But if you fall behind, it's going to get worse. We've talked about this all year in the offseason too. We didn't feel like Florida State was a team that maybe could stretch the field vertically and throw the ball and could rally from a significant deficit. We haven't seen Florida State get behind yet. You don't want to see them get behind. I guess what I'm getting at, though, is what happens if some level of adversity faces you at Virginia, whether it's a Tommy injury or the scoreboard or whatnot. Do you feel better about Kevin Sperry, or do you feel better about Brock Glenn from an experience standpoint? I think Kevin's ceiling is incredible. Like, I think we can see enough against two bad opponents to acknowledge that. But the Brock experience factor, I think, has some value in this discussion. It's still, I'm not sure there's a true number two yet, but I think I could argue the coaches may be figuring that out pretty fast.
So you're pumping the brakes on Sperry being the true number two. I guess let me ask you this. Do you feel like there is still a chance that with everything that we have seen through games 2 and 3, that should he need to, Brock Glenn is going to be the guy that comes out as the number 2 guy against Virginia? Is there any I don't mean to make it a black and white thing, but do you feel like there is a chance that he is that first quarterback out there, even with everything that we've seen?
And I'm not non-answering it. This is where, if we had seen practice, not just a spring or camp, if we felt really good about Kevin Sperry and
I'm getting a coach speak answer. Damn it, Bob.
I like Kevin Sperry a lot. I ain't giving up on Brock Glenn. Like, I'm happy Brock Glenn's on this roster. I'm happy he didn't transfer. So I don't want to, I'm not going to abandon that story on him. You know what? You may need Jalen King at some point this year. We saw him a little bit against Kent State too. Not saying he's going in there, because I think he's still kind of that distant, third or fourth guy. If we're saying that Brock and Kevin are tied.
Sure.
I can easily argue for Kevin Sperry. The only argument I can make for Brock is he close enough to 100%? And do you like the experience factor? Do you like what he's got as far as relationship with receivers, offensive line, etc.?
If you're Brock Glenn, even if you do find yourself being a guy that comes in if Castellanos gets hurt, do you feel like the writing is on the wall this time for Glenn in terms of, and this is a very down the road, like big picture question, but it's not like the situation last year where Luke came in and it wasn't always pretty. And granted, there were obviously many, many things that contributed to that. First and foremost, we didn't really get any of these cupcake games until Charleston Southern at the end of the year. Your cupcakes, unfortunately, were Mike Norvell's former college institution, and they put a whooping on you. So you didn't really have the opportunities to kind of evaluate last season until around the Charleston Southern time. And yeah, it was Luke that got the start. I can't remember entirely how he looked there. Obviously, it's a moot point because Luke's not here now. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you feel like you have gotten a good look at Sperry. He looked calm in the offense. I love the way he layers the football. Obviously, he's not afraid to lower his shoulder and fight for extra yards. And that's a lot of that was probably Brock Glenn's best quality, was his competitiveness, was his ability to run circles around you. Not literally in terms of speed, but he is a willing runner and a physical runner. Kevin Sperry, to me, just seems to have that extra composure that maybe Brock lacks at times. And it's hard to forecast because, again, there is the caveat. He is a true freshman. We don't know how he's going to look on the road. We do know how Brock looks on the road. Not the best sample size there. So all of that is to ask you, if you're Brock, do you see the writing on the wall? Do you see Kevin Sperry coming in, getting all these snaps and saying, hey, this might be it? Is it transfer portal at the end of the season? Is it even a conversation worth having right now?
Yeah, this is a tough one for Brock, right? Because do you have some level of self-doubt? You have confidence in yourself as a competitor, and we know Brock is a competitor. Like that's his alpha characteristic that's really up there. I think the other down the road wrinkle is there's not going to be a portal in the spring anymore. Brock will have to decide, hey, I'm in this competition because there's no spring. He's got to make that decision, and then potentially we're looking at a January transfer portal. He won't have the chance to audition again. If he feels the indication from the coaches is Kevin Sperry's ahead, whether that's Kevin Sperry's ahead because he's a better fit, or Brock's lingering injury, if it's hanging around in some minor way. We're throwing a lot of stuff out there before game 4 that may not apply until down the line, but sure, I think Brock has to have some question over how he's viewed, because I think, Brock probably feels like, hey, I'm the veteran guy. I've got relationships with a lot of the players on the roster, even though this roster is new. But yeah, I mean, we've seen enough from Kevin so far. If he keeps passing tests, he's going to win the exam. I mean, let's just say it that way. Sure. But still, I look at depth charts and I start thinking about, okay, what if Tommy Castellanos keeps going at this rate? He's going to be gone to pro football. Jalen King's going to want to play somewhere. He may not want to stick around at Florida State next year as a maybe guy. I start looking at quarterback depth charts and I start thinking for 2026, well, don't you want to have more guys with experience to compete and push a Kevin Sperry? I also know that's not the way college football goes because of this transfer and grass is always greener world.
Yeah, and the transfer portal being changed to a singular January period definitely throws a wrinkle in that. It's a very convoluted, multi-layered question because you're right. You do have that, well, hey, if Castellanos continues to have a Heisman quality season, there's nothing that's going to stop him from entering the NFL draft apart from, I mean, I couldn't even think of anything that would hold him back. If that is the hype and buzz around him, go make your money in the NFL. I think everybody would be behind that. So you do get well, hey, if that's going to happen, there's a quarterback battle between Sperry and Glenn, and to a lesser extent, Jalen King. You don't have time to see that play out anymore because there is no spring portal window. So the opportunities that you're getting now, and to a lesser extent later in the season, just throwing out things like, let's say that Virginia Tech is still woefully uncompetitive and you're up 40-0 or 35-0 at halftime later in the season, and then we get another look here. That might be a better indication about where they're leaning to, but that's also the repetitions that are going to count for whoever that number 2 or number 3 guy is. You're not going to get the opportunity to really compete into the spring and then figure everything out. Like, it's going to be for better or for worse. And I do think that the transfer portal changes are better for college football, but for the player here in this niche circumstance, it's going to be a decision time for Brock. And it might be an uncomfortable one. You throw out his quotes from the past 2 seasons where he could have transferred. No, I like Florida State. I love Florida State. I love this place. Well, when playing time comes into play, how much can you truly put your love for a place in a university over your dreams of starting consistently in college football and then beyond that? It's really tough to juggle, Bob, and it's going to be fascinating to watch moving forward. Any closing thoughts from you on that before we move on? Because we do have one more thing to tackle here.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. Coaches want one portal window. They want January. They want players to go through strength and conditioning programs. They want spring ball to develop. They don't want a portal exodus after spring ball. I think there was somebody reported this, 1,000 or more players went in the portal after spring football. That changes rosters. Yep. And it's great that Florida State has Gavin Sawchuk. It might be great that Florida State has Gavin Blackwell, a couple other guys on the offensive line that Florida State landed. Those guys could really help the Seminoles short-term, long-term. We've already seen Gavin Sawchuk, so we've already seen what Gavin can do. A great pickup, obviously. But things are going to change potentially for coaches for the better from a roster management standpoint. And it's an interesting dynamic, not just at Florida State, but at other schools. You're going to see quarterback competitions around the country where quarterbacks are going, I don't know how I fit in with this coaching staff. And then what happens, Nick, too? Let's throw in the coaching carousel is going to happen in November and December like crazy. I mean, we've already got Virginia Tech and UCLA wide open. Florida could open. What happens at how many other schools?
Could open.
Arkansas just lost to Memphis. Speaking of previous institution, Arkansas just lost to Memphis. Arkansas could come open. There are so many jobs, and every time a job opens, what happens if school hires an offensive coordinator and wants to bring in that offensive coordinator's quarterback? So the dynamics of these quarterback transfers are going to get potentially, I don't want to say worse, maybe just more frequent, more concern over where do I settle in the view of my coach and my program.
Sure. Speaking of coaching carousel, that's actually exactly where I wanted to go to close out the show. Tony White getting his first word on the topic of the UCLA job yesterday in terms of his name in the rumor mill. Obviously, it was an instant connection. Hey, this is a guy that's interviewed for the UCLA job once. Obviously, they hired and have now fired Deshaun Foster. Rumors were that Tony White joined a phone call briefly about the job. He later clarified that he was eating dinner with his family, got on a Zoom call with some friends. They asked him about the job, and he said, no, not worried about that, hung up the phone and continued on with his day. He said all the right things, Bob, as Tony White is very well known to do. He pushes the right buttons. He says the right things. I think he's done an effective job of calming that initial wave of rumor mill and speculation. How do you feel like he did handling that from your perspective?
I just thought it was hilarious that he encountered this before fall even started. Today's the first day of fall. He's going to have to live all fall dealing with the UCLA questions, dealing with every other job that comes open too. It's not just UCLA. I would argue UCLA is not a great job. And I say that as an outsider. as an outsider from thousands of miles away and having done what research that we do about these programs. We listen to podcasts, we read stories. Hey, they may be big game hunting. I listened to a podcast and they said they may go after Troy Aikman at UCLA just to bring in a guy
With what money?
But they think Troy might, galvanize the fan base and the NIL to support the rev share. Look, UCLA might try something crazy like that just because of what I'm throwing out there. We don't know where this job search is going. Tony White is going to be a head coach sooner or later. But if he can compartmentalize this, I almost chuckled when he said, I haven't been contacted about the job. You've got an agent. Your agent's probably been contacted by somebody. At some point, Michael Alford is going to get the phone call, email, whatever. That's going to happen. That's college football. It's college football for Mike Norvell too, right? I mean, Mike has dealt with this at Memphis. Here, if you hire good assistants and you are good on Saturdays, your assistant coaches are going to be candidates for jobs. That's the way it goes. It happened in the Bowden era, happened to Jimbo Fisher. It's happening earlier. I think that's what's kind of struck me as this shouldn't be happening in mid-September, but it is. That's kind of where we are now with this coaching carousel.
Do you know who Tony White's agent is off the top of your head?
The only bet I would have is Jimmy Sexton, but I have no idea if it is Jimmy.
I'm going to quickly run through here. I don't know if it's going to be publicly available, or at least not without deep research on a live stream here. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to agree with you. I think his agent probably has heard from UCLA. I would imagine that Tony has heard through one way or another that he is a candidate for this job. It's coming as a surprise to him, obviously. But I do think, as I said before, he said the right things. He said what he needed to, I think, calm the initial fears of him being truly interested in that job, because if reports get out, he is truly interested in a job. That's when that news storm really starts to develop and it gets harder and harder to focus on your current task at hand. So I got to admit, I did. It struck the right nerve when he's talking about being here with this team and the privilege that it is to be defensive coordinator at this university, because I don't know that that's something that would have necessarily been said by the last guy here. Not that he didn't appreciate the job, but after a while, you kind of start to feel, at least to me, like there was that you started to notice that disconnect a little bit more. And it's like, okay, this isn't going well, yada, yada, yada. There's going to be changes coming soon. I think the best trait or one of the better traits that Tony has is that he's able to speak what he says and say what he thinks. And there's no miscommunication in terms of what T. White is feeling and what he wants from not only his players, but his fellow coaching staff. I think that was accomplished in his comments. So I'm also glad that he didn't kind of push it under the rug. He did his best to address it as forward as he could have been. He could have swept aside the question and said, hey, we're not talking about that now. Next question. He gave a pretty good answer for what it was. So I think that everything's going to be okay, I guess, because there is definitely fear of losing Tony too soon. I've said from the moment that I talked to him in spring, this guy is going to be a head coach somewhere. And it looks like it may happen sooner rather than later. I'm sure Florida State fans, Bob, are at least hoping for one full year, maybe two, of this Tony White defense.
Yeah, and I mean, worst case scenario is Tony White gets deep in this UCLA job. It happens, say, in November, where he has to leave the team and force it into bowl practices in December. You have Zach Arnett as a defensive analyst who's been a defensive coordinator. You have John Papuchis, who has been a defensive coordinator. I think I would lean on Arnett as a guy who's been a head coach and defensive coordinator in the SEC to be that guy for bowl season and whatnot. So you have layers of insurance, so to speak, as far as a coaching staff. You do this on the recruiting trail. It's not just one coach building a relationship with a prospect. It's multiple coaches. So I I don't lose sleep over this, and you should not lose sleep over this if you're a Florida State fan. But again, this comes with the territory. Florida State was able to keep Mickey Andrews forever, but that's, Mickey was kind of a unicorn, a Bud Foster at Virginia Tech, similar case. There just aren't that many Bud Fosters and Mickey Andrews in the world. You're going to eventually have a coordinator who is hotly pursued by somebody.
My hot take is that if Tony White does move on this offseason, it's going to be Zach Arnett that replaces him. I think that's a natural chain of succession. He already knows the staff. He already knows the personnel. He's obviously of the same coaching tree, that same kind of mind that Tony White's defense comes from. He's familiar with that. That would be, if I'm Mike, and this is all hypothetical at this point, that would be the move that I make, is to hire from within. You see what this defense has been able to do. You see the physicality that this defense can bring. It's not going to be one-to-one the same, but I'm a big fan of continuity. That's about as close to continuity as you're going to be able to get. So I mean, we've touched on it here or there, but bringing in Zach Arnett has been one of the power moves of Mike Norvell for this offense, or for this offseason. Obviously, Gus Malzahn for the offense is probably the biggest, which is why my tongue slipped there. But bringing in Zach Arnett, certainly a great move that is proving to be dividends. And hey, if Tony White does leave for another job, I think that's exactly where they go.
And just to throw this in here, it was insurance for $75,000. That's Zach Arnett's salary at Florida State. So again, you're not spending that much money to bring in somebody who has familiarity with the scheme with Tony White, and to have another eye in the sky. Zach's up there in the box, whereas most of the staff nowadays, except for Tony Tokars, is on the field. You get a really experienced guy up top in the coach's box. And in case you need somebody in bowl season to be your coordinator, to be who knows, maybe an on-field position coach if something changes, if a position coach happens to leave, right? Against layers of insurance within the blanket layers that you have as a head coach. Mike Norvell has kind of stacked this coaching talent to be there if needed.
All well said, Bob. That'll conclude today's Seminole Sidelines. The front, that is going to trip me up until the end of time. It is a tongue twister. The Front Row Knowles crew are going to be back on Wednesday for their show. Bob is, of course, going to be there. So Tom, Keith, and Bob are going to have you hooked up for the Wednesday content on the Osceola.com YouTube channel. Obviously, you've seen it in the scroll down below, 31% off and a $25 gift card to the Osceola's brand new merchandise store. You saw that ad for it in the middle of the show. Obviously, great deal. You're going to get a ton of great content on the Osceola.com, as well as $25 off on some great merchandise. Beyond that, of course, keep subscribing to the Osceola newsletter. That's the best way to get information directly to your inbox every single day. What you need to know, when you need to know it, no fluff. Everything is going to be there. So subscribe to the Osceola newsletter. And of course, all the premium content is going to be paywalled, but it's going to be worth it. You can subscribe to the Osceola.com. Again, take advantage of that 31% off. It's a good deal. It's a good deal. As I said, Tom, Keith, and Bob back on Wednesday with Front Row Knowles. We're going to try and figure out what to do about a show this week. In addition to that, whether that's going to be Thursday or not. These Friday night away games kind of throw a wrinkle every single year, and it's kind of hard to judge kind of where to go with that. If there's any important news that emerges over the next couple of days, you can guarantee yourselves that we're going to be on here talking about it. But we've got some stuff to figure out. So make sure that you stay keyed in on Twitter, the message boards, all that jazz to figure out what's going on. So with that being said, my name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer, recruiting writer for the Osceola.com. That is head editor Bob Ferrante. We will see you all later. Thank you so much for tuning in.